just wanted to turn the fan off because I don't want no background.
When his hair blowing in the video.
There we go.
Hey.
There we go. I needed a joke. We need to break the ice. First of all, the youngest people got the less hair, least amount of hair. So, look, it's all right, man. What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Turn to Your Neighbor, the show where me and some of my very, very good friends invite you into our most intimate and sometimes ridiculous conversations and debates. And today we have a very special episode for you. This episode, we're going to be talking about a topic that I believe is more important now than ever. Today's episode is dedicated to our Black youth, particularly our Black male youth. And our special guests today are very excited to share their insights on the importance of having Black male mentors and role models as we all navigate through life. Now, this is an extremely special episode for me. On a day where we are talking about mentors and positive Black role models, I can honestly say that each one of these brothers right here were mentors to me at one point or another. I know some of you are like, well, aren't these your peers? And yes, we may be similar and close to age, but we all go down our own individual paths in life. And there is nothing like having someone in your corner, someone who you can look to, who has been exactly where you are and can give you guidance and advice, judgment-free and always out of love. And I can say without any doubt that these four guys right here have helped me become the man I am today. So without further ado, I'm going to have them just introduce themselves so you guys can get to know them a little bit more.
Hey everybody, my name is Lawrence Claiborne. I currently serve as a youth pastor and adjunct professor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Granum. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the New Covenant Church campus. And my wife and I actually started an outreach program of the New Covenant Church called the Sports and Mentoring Student Community, or SAMS Community, in which our goal is to help students identify their abilities and give them a desire to pursue their passions. And so mentorship has always been something very much a big part of my life, and something I want to continue to explore and develop.
What's going on? I'm Dante Milligan. I've been teaching middle and high school students for the last 7 years in and around the city of Philadelphia, currently out in New Jersey for the first time. I serve as a youth minister in West Philadelphia, seminary student as well, and take every opportunity I have outside of that to jump into any mentorship, summer camp, coaching programs that I have the ability to do.
And I'm Horace Rooney. I've been in education for over 20 years. Currently, I am a curriculum supervisor for English Language Arts in Tredyffrin Easttown. And throughout my years, I've definitely seen the importance of mentoring. I actually had a mentorship program recently, and I find it extremely important that young men and women, but for me, my focus has always been young men, having role models and mentors so that they can move on to be productive. So that's just a little bit about me.
Awesome. So let's just dive right into it, guys. We're talking about Black mentors, Black role models. Like, Dante, why do you think it's important to have Black mentors and role models in your life, especially the lives of youth?
So I think that, first of all youth, all adolescents need positive figures in their life to look up to and to model their life after. You have to see something happen in real time and in real life for you to understand that it's possible. So you have to see people walk into certain spaces for you to know that you can do that as well. And so that becomes increasingly important in the lives of African Americans and Latinos, and specifically African American boys. Young African American boys face some of the harshest outcomes and statistics when we dig into it in terms of incarceration, in terms of retention rates and dropout rates. They're usually at the bottom or near the bottom of all those lists, and the black fatherhood and Black men are really not a part of the community for several reasons. They've been alienated and separated from these communities. And so the dismantling of the Black family has a lot to do with that. So we all, really have to take a step up and be the role models and mentors for these young Black men and young Black boys, because it's the only way that they're going to get a leg up, and it's the only way that we're going to advance and move upward and have upward mobility within the Black community.
Awesome. I think for me, in terms of the importance of having Black male mentors, I think about my first experience in mentoring. And I was mentoring a young man from elementary school in Conshohocken. And it became very apparent to me after sort of just consistent sessions with him and just kind of hanging out, how much of a void I was meeting in his life. There were so many circumstances that he was facing that really shocked me when he was able to sort of communicate it to me. And in my conversations with the principal, I just realized that, you know, how much he didn't really have in terms of a network around him to provide him with the kind of support he needed. But most importantly, I think is sort of offering the visual of an individual who he can liken himself to be. And it was in that moment that I recognized how pivotal it is to not only be involved in mentorship, but as a Black man, the kind of impact that I could have and why it is so significant in the role in the lives of our young Black youth. So from that point on, I've really just been committed to the work, and, you know, really that was sort of the eye-opening experience for me to make me aware firsthand in terms of, you know, the role a Black male mentor can make in someone's life.
Awesome. Anybody else?
Yeah, just to add on to what my brothers have said, I think that mentorship is literally essential. I think that mentorship is something that can help anybody develop, grow, and mature. I think that we all need to have somebody who we can kind of point to that's doing what we might want to do or aspire to be. And oftentimes those mentors are at a distance. But I think that there's something about an intimate relationship with somebody who's going where you're going or been where you want to go can really help to grow an individual exponentially through that exposure. And so I believe that as Black men, we are really, really necessary considering our context, considering the demographics and the information that Dante said, considering what Sam said. About the scope of our influence. I think that we need to continue to bridge gaps. We are, as African Americans, inherently communal, and with being communal, there is a responsibility or a call to sow into the next generation to help prepare them for what is going to be passed on, that mantle that's going to be passed on to them.
No, I agree. I mean, it's interesting. So not to really get off of the subject, when you talk about passing the mantle, what struck me when the NBA started back up and they had sort of the campaign, and I saw sort of like this commercial where they used the song Bigger from Beyonce and sort of had like a very visual sort of illustration of like all of the civil rights movement into today and the conversation and what I heard in terms of the lyrics of the song were about legacy, right? And when you talked about passing the mantle, we all are connected, you know? And so I think really establishing that true sense of community, recognizing that, listen, you know, that there's a lineage here, you know, we owe it to the next generation to impart what we've received. And I think once that becomes clear, you know, it's hard not to sort of answer the call.
Awesome.
I think that too, for many different reasons, you know, many of our young men have not been able to answer the call. And, you know, from the outside looking in, you know, there's a lot of judgmental people that will look at Black men and look at the dearth of Black fathers and look at the high number of, or just, you know, the inordinate number of Black men in prison and be very quick, you know, to make judgment, not realizing, you know, systemically, socially, you know, economically, how many, you know, how many ways we have to overcome obstacles that others do not. And so because of that, because of, all of those factors, making such a negative impact on our young black men, just the negative imagery and people willing to write them off, people automatically assuming that, we're not as smart or we're not as intellectually capable as, people from other races. We're more inclined to violence. We get described as super predators, and it goes on and on. Because of that fact, because there's been such a terrible, impact that all of these things have had, then it's incumbent upon us, who through the grace of God, have been able to, make a better life for ourselves and our loved ones, and and avoid, incarceration, avoid all the pitfalls and the minds that are in our way as we strive to, better ourselves. It's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're doing, as has already been suggested, we are, looking out for our young black men, letting them know, hey, look, I look like you, and I've been through what you've been through. It might not be the exact same experience, but, hey, we're all in this together. And to let them know that, they can find a way. It's just they're going to have to be, very diligent and very consistent and disciplined in the way they find that way. So just it's very important because, it's this system in this country, it makes it difficult for a black man to aspire.
Yeah, that's so important. That is so important. And a lot of people don't understand. You don't really know what someone else is going through because everyone doesn't wear the same shoes as a young black African American man and woman. So I know that we are all mentors in our own right. But who were your mentors growing up? Who did you look up to? Who guided you to the person that you are today?
I mean, I think that's such a tough question because there's so many little influences. There's people here and there that have influenced certain things. I mean, you can go all the way to the Uncle Phils of the world and the Dr. Huxtables, not the Bill Cosby's, the Dr. Huxtables of the world. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you can say those were influences, and then you can talk about personal people. I think for me, I think of there's three gentlemen that I think of specifically. One is the great Norman Brown II, big Norman, because he was influenced for anyone watching that doesn't know that's Ricky's father, but he was there for me at a time when I was struggling with my father. We only lived 2 blocks away, so I was always able to come around. And he taught me what it looked like to just have an open door and an open heart. His house was always open to me. His heart was always open. And he was always ready to have a conversation. And there was never a time that you couldn't speak to him or a subject that you couldn't speak about. And then I have 2 uncles in my life. And the thing that sticks out to me about both of them is the way that they stood behind their wives. And so one of my uncles, my Aunt Donna, his wife is a pastor, which is already sort of tough as a female. But I watched him take that first man role, you know what I mean? And he's the guy giving out, the bulletins in the back and, making sure the finances are okay and sweeping up after church is over and stuff like that. And he's a masculine guy. Quote unquote, what society would say is a masculine guy. I never saw him as weak or anything like that, but I always saw him for 30 years tirelessly support his wife in her career, where she was the one who was the figurehead and she was the one who was at front. And I think I took a lot from that. And I have another uncle whose wife had, may she rest in peace, had severe mental illness. And I watched him never leave her, and I watched him stay by her side and deal with everything that she had to do. And so I think from them, I got this lesson on loyalty and on support that I haven't seen elsewhere. And I didn't even really understand as a kid that was so unique. What I was watching, I took it for granted in some ways. I was like, yeah, that's what men do. We stand by, you know, the women that we're with a lot of men don't. So if I had to pick, I would have to take those three and really big them up.
That's a good point. There are so many. You know, you get your role models, the guys and the influence that you never really got to meet. You only get to look up to the Uncle Phils. You know, for me, it was Will Smith and The Fresh Prince. You know, you just pick and choose characteristics that you kind of want yourself to emulate. But that also takes wisdom and guidance. You know, not to pick up the wrong patterns or wrong habits. Anyone else want to share?
Sure. I mean, for me, I'll say that, like, I think about my whole life journey and how there's been these windows of influence, if you will, especially in like my professional career. You know, when I worked for Citigroup for about 12 years, and I remember meeting a gentleman who ended up being our chief operating officer. His name was Ed Bates. And his demeanor was different, mild-mannered man, but you know, being a black male in a predominantly white environment, he was someone I noticed immediately, and he really just had an open door. And it was the only time I really felt comfortable in that kind of setting, just openly sharing. You know, even in terms of my professional aspirations, I just felt a comfort level in communicating, where it wasn't necessarily that I wanted anything in return, but I always, you know, Horace was talking about the landmines that Black men have to navigate, and in corporate America, you know, it's similar. So it's like you're very aware of how you are conducting yourself in certain environments and circumstances. But I found that in his office, I could be true to myself and just, you know, share, you know, what it is that I wanted to pursue. And he definitely helped me just in terms of a plan, a pathway. But again, I think for me, it was just observing him in various meeting settings where things could get contentious, and just seeing his demeanor and how he was able to stay calm and cool and collected was something that I just picked up on. Coming out of college, I had an opportunity to intern with the Sixers, and I got a chance to meet World B. Free. And he and I, you know, we still have a relationship today. And he's just a person that he is amazing. He is amazing. I mean, a person who does not have to commit himself to community activism and outreach the way he does. I mean, he's made his bones, he's done what he's done, but he is committed to community in a way that, like, is so authentic, it's real. And the fact that we've been able to maintain a relationship, and I was an intern, and I know every year they have interns that go through that door, you know? And so the fact that as soon as he sees me, he knows my wife and I mean, granted, we have the same name, but he knows who we are, you know? And so it's still like all love. I can always pick up the phone and call him. And quite frankly, he helped me actually land my workout to actually play my only year of professional basketball. He actually made a call for me on my behalf, and Jaron Jackson was my coach from 1 year I did play. So he's someone that I really you know, admire greatly, just because, again, I see the work that he's doing and the fact that he's able to have authentic relationships with the people he meets.
Anybody else want to share who was a positive role model mentor to them?
Sure, I'll share. So definitely my dad. I'd be remiss. He recently passed away. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him. He, you know, took care of his children after, you know, his wife, you know, left, essentially. And he eventually did get remarried, but, you know, he was there for us, you know, during a pretty difficult time. And so definitely would have to mention him. But I wanted to also just talk to some of the sisters who have been mentors. And I know we're, you know, really predominantly focused on, you know, Black men, but I think I would want to definitely include them in the mix. And so thinking about,
of course.
Beth Winslow, who taught me how to sing and was a spiritual mentor for me as a youngster. And then Michelle Brown, who I met at Simon Gratz High School, who still mentors me today in the area of education. My cousin Cosette, another person who has really supported me, got me to join the Philadelphia Writing Project, and has been, just helping me make solid decisions in terms of my career and education. I've got Crystal Gary Nelson, who Ricky's familiar with. I worked under her as an assistant principal, for 6 years. My mother, has really been helpful, beneficial to me through thick and thin. And so, while I've had, the pleasure and just the favor to be able to, have, brothers in my life, men in my life outside my dad, I definitely wanted to give a shout out to some of the sisters because they have and continue to be, really important places in my life. So those are just a few that come to mind.
No, for sure, that's so important. And I love that we get to give the people the flowers right now, because sometimes we don't get to say everything, how we feel about someone and how much they impacted our lives. So it's very important, male, female. This meant so many people, and this is one of those moments that are very, very special that we get to tell them how much we appreciate them.
Yeah, so just to piggyback off of all three brothers, I think it's interesting to hear how we got to where we are because of people who invested in us. Mm-hmm. I think that might be the root, that drives us to do what we do. Me particular, speaking for myself. But just like Horace said, there have been both men and women who have literally been clarity, voice, reason, guidance. And so it started at home for me. My mom and dad are most definitely my most influential mentors or role models, if you will. They have shown me what unconditional love is, which is, I think, the start of any good relationship. My aunts and uncles, we have a large, close-knit family, and each of them has sown in some way. And then as I transitioned, I guess, into the professional and ministry settings, I've been blessed to have people who made it in a point and to be intentional about helping to guide me through. If I was going to name names, I will. I have to start with my pastor, Reverend Dr. Alan E. Waller. He has been, words can't even express the level of gratitude I have towards him for the privilege of literally being able to be, on his hip and to learn and continue to receive, even to this day, guidance and wisdom as I continue to journey, as y'all pretty much know, in ministry. But I also can't leave out the Reverend Dr. Wayne E. Croft Sr. I currently serve under him as his youth pastor and am under him also educationally. And so the way he's helped me to navigate the pastor/professor role has been paramount. And so with that, with family and with professional and ministry settings, those mentorships, I would not be who I am because they are. That's probably the best way I can say it. I am because they are, and I will be eternally grateful to each of them for their involvement and investment in me.
Awesome. And I am, go ahead.
Okay, I know I was cut off, but the two people that I would be remiss if I didn't mention, Ben Ellis Sr. He was the chief operating officer for the New Covenant campus prior to me coming on board. He's had many positions within the city of Philadelphia. He's a tremendous mind. When I say tremendous, he almost is like a MacGyver in terms of just capabilities. He's a very capable individual. There's nothing that he could not put his mind to and accomplish. And it's something that is really awe-inspiring. And so, the fact that we can get on the phone and talk today is something that to Lawrence's point, it's like, it has definitely shaped me significantly over the last 4 or 5 years. And then, Pastor Bob Oliver of the New Covenant Church, this is a man who came from, the pharmaceutical space and stepped into a role as a pastor in a very later stage of life. And for me to sort of observe his transition to see his commitment to Christ and his commitment to the work, and recognizing that at no point was this about him, but about the work of the Lord. And I saw it, and I saw it in a way that no one could ever tell me different, And so again, I really, it's something that will stick with me forever. And, because of that, I know it's absolutely shaped, the way I think about life is because of what I've observed from those two men. And then, last but not least, because, Horace did mention his father. It's interesting about my dad because I would have never considered him a mentor for most of my life. But as I've gotten older, he's played that kind of role. And it's just amazing to see the manifestation of our relationship where he can mentor me now when that was not really a possibility in the past. So I'm very grateful for that.
Wow, that's good. I know I said earlier that you all have impacted me in such a positive way. I consider you guys peers and also mentors and role models. But it wasn't always like that for me, God blessed me to meet you guys, but I had some times where I followed the wrong people. There's been some people where looking back, I can say, oh, this was the total opposite person I should be trying to model my life. So what would you say to someone, or what advice would you give someone when they're trying to pick a mentor? I know, growing up as a kid, youth in Philadelphia, you can get pulled into a lot of different directions, So what advice would you give someone who hasn't really attached himself or, been surrounded by a positive male role model? What would you say to someone trying to look for that person to make sure to help them find the right person? What do you look for in a mentor?
So I would say, just to start, do your research. We live in a time where there's really no excuse not to research anybody. You can find somebody's biography, you can find somebody's resume, CV, if you just do enough digging. Do your research. Reach out to that person, express interest, be personable, be clear about what it is that you expect. Because sometimes we would walk into something one way, expecting one thing, and the person may not have the time or availability to do such. So I would say start off with do your research, make sure that the person is who they say they are. Because as Ricky said, it's possible for somebody to be the opposite of what they say they are or what they say they'll do. So do your research, make sure the person has integrity, character, and somebody that is where you potentially see yourself being. And then I would say temper your expectations and let them kind of navigate from there.
Awesome.
I mean, I think part of it, in terms of that question, I've never quite heard it posed that way, but I think part of it would have to do with, what you were pursuing, right? So it's like for someone to wake up, say, hey, I need a mentor, more than likely there's something specific that they're trying to achieve where they say, hey, it's like, I need guidance in this kind of area. And so I think, that's the first thing, your own commitment to what it is you're trying to seek out. And I think Lawrence touched on something that I would also kind of piggyback on, in the sense of they have to be able to make space for you. You know what I'm saying? Like a good mentor makes room and space for you. And so if you find yourself in a situation where, they're not responsive and you almost feel like, hey, I'm kind of nagging this person, it's not going to feel comfortable for you. And whatever, ultimately it's not going to feed you the way you need to be fed. Like a good mentoring relationship is one where there's investment and it's pouring in. You're not paying for the service. You know what I'm saying? Like if I have to pay for this in terms of whatever, it's like ultimately the cup should be poured the other way, right? So I would encourage that is sort of the feel you get in your interaction, in your engagement with that person. So, there is a fill out period at times. And unfortunately, you run into a scenario where you realize, hey, this may not be the best mentor for me, but that should never deter you from pursuing good mentoring, in anything that you do. You just realize if you recognize it might not be this person, you find the person. But, I think if you're as you engage in your life, I think it's just a good idea as a best practice is to find someone in that space that is doing it and sort of make that alignment.
I want to add to something that Lawrence said too. He said, temper your expectations. And I think that's so crucial because when we do start to look for mentors, we forget that the mentors are human, just like we are. And so your mentor makes mistakes, and your mentor might do some things that you don't agree with or that you shouldn't follow, and that's okay. But you just have to have the judgment and understand that they're going to have flaws. You know, earlier I said Mr. Huxtable, and then I kind of laughed and said, well, not Bill Cosby though, right? And now, obviously I'm being a little bit facetious, but if I really dig into that a little bit, if we look at the man that Bill Cosby was, right, there's plenty of positives. I could rattle off a list of those, and we are all too familiar with all of the negatives. And if you're following somebody for their career, make sure that you focus on the things they do in their career. They might do some things in their personal life that you don't need to be bothered with. You know what I mean? And that goes, I think, in many situations. Just, you know, temper that expectation, understand that you're still following a flawed human being at the end of the day. And I probably wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't add on to that ultimately your mentor should be Christ, because he has no flaws.
Mentoring isn't mirroring.
Yep.
So to your point, I think you guys have made some really great points. I would say that what you look for can often also depend upon kind of the nature of the mentorship. And so, for example, for me, I had wanted to become an educational administrator, and I had gotten my degree, and my hope was to be able to obtain an opportunity to become either an assistant principal or principal. And what I found out was that, you know, just because you get the degree doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the opportunity. And fortunately, I had the opportunity to get into a leadership symposium where I met a Black man who looked clearly younger than me and yet was a principal. And so in my mind, I wanted to, you know, take some time to network with this gentleman. Shout out to Jonas Crenshaw. You really helped me to get my first opportunity, got me an opportunity for an interview. And, you know, I said, you know, this gentleman is where I want to be. And so I'd like to get to talk to this brother and find out what his journey was. You know, how did he come about, you know, obtaining the career that, you know, the career path that he was currently walking. And so to that point, I in terms of career mentorship, I strive and I give the advice to isolate and locate people who are, you know, walking the path that you want to walk. But then if I'm thinking about personal mentorship, you know, if there are people who you have the opportunity to see in different walks of life and get to really know, then what I would say is you want to follow someone who basically who demonstrates the wisdom of what it is that they say, like they're walking the talk. You know, the Bible says that wisdom justifies her children. So it's like, I want somebody who is, when they say something, they actually do it. Like, not to say that they're perfect to, you know, Dante's point, but overall, you know, they're walking what they talk. And, you know, if you can see someone whose life reflects the fact that, you know, they're a genuine person, not someone who says one thing, does another, but who you can see, or even like when they make mistakes, they don't make excuses, they fall and they get back up. If you have the opportunity to meet someone like that, then that would be someone, you know, I would definitely recommend that you take some time to get to know, because, you know, that's an amazing attribute in people that can't be taken for granted.
Yeah, walking what you talk is so important to being a quality, effective mentor. But that also comes with a lot of pressure. You know, people are looking up to you for guidance. You know that they're watching your actions and the way you walk. So my question is, how do you manage your own insecurities, knowing that you are a mentor for others? You know, how do you fight that urge, or how do you, you know, not, you feel the pressure of people watching you. You know no one's perfect. How do you deal with the internal struggle of knowing that you might be in a fishbowl? You might have younger kids and sometimes people older
Right.
than you watching you. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think,
So, go ahead.
well, I think part of it is sort of leading with the explanation that you are not perfect, right? So
Right.
it's like you kind of set the framework from the very beginning that I'm a very flawed individual and we are all in this together. I am constantly growing. And it's interesting because recently with the mentoring program my wife and I are facilitating, we feel the Lord is sort of urging us to do more peer mentoring. So it's not just a relationship with the mentees or mentees as children, but it's like we can mentor each other in front of the children. You know what I'm saying? So they're not only seeing a relationship between them and a mentor, but they're seeing mentors come together, encouraging one another to pursue passions, explore possibilities in their own life, and also see the pathway, which isn't a straight line, right? Like they'll see and hear about the errors and the times things got tripped up. So they recognize it's all part of a larger process. So, I think just being transparent. Now, granted, there are always going to be things about us that we want to keep close to the vest. I personally think that's okay. I know that there's sort of a word about not being a stumbling block for others, right? Meaning that I know if there's things about me that I expose, you may not be able to see past that anymore. So in light of that, I think it's just about being as transparent as you can be about what you think is relevant, information, and then sort of establishing the fact that, hey, we're walking this together. There might be some information that I have that you have not obtained yet that I'll freely give, but it doesn't mean that I'm devoid of making mistakes in this pathway.
Hey, to Sam's point, what I wanted to also say is that, and being a father, being willing to admit to, making mistakes. I think to try to live perfectly, I think would actually become, something of a stumbling block for people, because it's just like, I can't attain to perfection. But what I can do is I can see what a person does when they fall. Do they stay down or do they get back up? And are they willing to admit mistakes? Are they willing to admit failures? And so I think that just being transparent in your walk, realizing it when you make mistakes and acknowledging them, and then allowing people to see what your journey to redemption looks like, so that when they fall, even in that situation, they can still hopefully view you as a mentor, because they see how you've been able to, basically, survive and grow. Now, we still have to be careful though, because certain mistakes, can be so, cataclysmic that it could, eventually dilute the impact that we have. So we always have to be mindful. But I do believe that there is strength in transparency and in being able to show people what happens when you fall.
I think we got to not be so hard on ourselves too. And I'm talking to myself when I say this, like it's something that I struggle with, but it's, it's, I feel like the enemy knows your insecurities really well. And it's food for him. Like he can just dig in at them. And so I know for myself, I could be, standing and either trying to project something or saying something to a group of kids, talking to them about their conflict management, talking to them about their anger or whatever. And then that voice starts popping in like, well, you was just angry last week, blah, 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 blah. Who are you to be telling people X, Y, and Z? And, it's, you have to know how to silence that voice, and you got to know how to take a step back and be like, I'm not perfect, and I wasn't called to do this because I was perfect. And, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So I don't, you know what I mean? I'm not standing here because I'm perfect and qualified for what it is that I'm supposed to do. I'm standing here because I was supposed to be here.
That was good, brother. That was good.
Yeah. Oh, I saw it.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah. If I could add on these brilliant brothers' perspectives, if I can add a voice. Ricky, you used the word insecurities. There's a saying that, blind spots don't necessarily mean that you're blind. Because we often think, I got something, on the record or something that I'm dealing with that disqualifies me for mentorship, from being or from doing, or what I think I'm called to do. And in fact, that's what Dante said. Qualified. Doesn't call the qualified, qualifies the call. Right. That's what it is. The mentorship is, while I'm becoming, I'm letting you peek in on my becoming. So yes, I'm going to have blind spots. Yes, I'm going to have insecurities. I'm going to have issues. But I need you to see that I'm consistent and persistent with whatever it is that I'm doing, in spite of. So not to get too churchy, if you will, we do what we do in spite of ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, and so that's a difficult thing to do when you're trying to help somebody who's burgeoning, and kind of like forming who they are or want to be. I agree. I think there's definitely two thoughts on this. There are those that believe that mentees should never see that side, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of our older mentors may have not talked through some of the baggage, right? Because you're not entitled to that. You're not my peer. You're my mentor. That whole kind of,
right.
And they inherited that, right? They inherited that from their mentors. But there's a new approach that I think we're talking about and kind of, actively working to kind of excavate. And that is, no, I got issues. Yeah. No, I'm broken. I'm broken. So I have a mentor that says, we're not worthy, but we're also not worth less. Mm-hmm. And it's this weird balance of, I'm not the best, but I'm not the worst either. And so I think that it's important to share that, because at some point they're going to be where we are, right? And so I think that authentically preparing somebody for the road, you know what I mean? And so I think too many times in mentee-mentor relationships, we want to pretend like the road has always been smooth. It's like saying, and Ricky, if you play basketball, there's a highlight reel, right? You can go to a highlight reel and see all the spectacular things, right? The accolades. Vince Carter's highlight reel is crazy, right? MJ is crazy. But what about the off nights? What about the nights where you didn't shoot, 70% from the field? So I think mentorship is, without overexposing, sharing some of the hiccups and some of the bumps along the way to fully form someone. Because none of us are without blemish or bump. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is so good, guys.
You didn't get too churchy there, man. You didn't get too churchy there.
All right, I wanted to make sure I, take that churchy hat off.
Listen.
It's hard to remove yourself. Yeah, it's who we are, man.
I looked at this panel and I'm like, being churchy is kind of innate. Like, we've all hit, the four of you have all hit spiritual connections throughout this whole dialogue. And now I feel a pull to go in this direction. I was talking to my biggest mentor, my father. I know Dante mentioned him too. But my dad, Norman Brown, is my biggest mentor, biggest role model, especially spiritually. And I got the pleasure of talking with him yesterday, coincidentally. And I was talking to my dad, and he shared how his relationship with his pastor, his bishop, is so strong, Bishop Grantham, Sam's father, because he was the one who introduced my dad to Christ. He's the one that, discipled him and taught him the way of being, a follower of Jesus. So that prompts me now, and I feel the pull, to ask you this question. What is the correlation between mentorship and discipleship? Is there a correlation? And what is that? I know this is, so we're going a different direction, but it's definitely on my heart.
That's good, man. It's funny though. As I process the question, I think about something Horace, I think, shared in terms of the idea of exposing the parts about you where you've overcome, or that the fact that you've been able to get back up. And Ricky is aware of this. Within Sam's community, we start every day off with what was called memorable moments, but it really is just sharing your testimony. I wanted to incorporate that kind of idea, but I wanted to call it something different that way it's all inclusive. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to be able to reach everyone, and I don't want vocabulary to like deter participation. Yeah. So, you know, we called it memorable moments, but what happens is students start sharing their victories of when they weren't able to excel at a certain class, and now they're getting A's, you know? And so, you know, once you start talking about the discipleship part, I couldn't help but want to include that component of just how important sharing your testimony is in a real mentoring relationship. If people need to know what you have gone through, or there's no way for them to glean anything from it, or to even feel inspiration from what you've been able to, you know, overcome, you know? And so it's like part of mentoring is the you know, or discipleship, in my opinion, is the ability to offer people sort of how, in my opinion, how Christ has guided me through all the circumstances in my life that had me where my feet are on the ground right now, you know? And so to me, it goes back to the transparency, but to me, it also includes an acknowledgement from my perspective in terms of where my source truly is. And I think within our mentoring program, I've been unashamed about my relationship with Christ, you know, and it's something that I put out in the forefront, not necessarily just to disarm, but just to allow people to understand, as I communicate to you, it's coming through a certain voice, a certain lens. This is how my mind has been shaped. You know, it's not to offend, but hopefully you can see who I am and understand my heart and what and why I'm doing it, you know? And so I think that is like a pure form of discipleship. It's just the opportunity and ability to just offer the circumstances and experiences that Christ has pulled you through, and be able to offer that to someone else.
Yeah, Sam, I love that you use the word testimony, man. You know, the Bible says, and correct me if I'm wrong, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And it makes me think, like, when I was as a teacher, so let me go back. When I was in school, I was not the best student, right? And the thing I used to hate about school the most in math class, do the problem, but it also says show your work.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes, you know, you could, if it's multiple choice, you can guess, you know, you get it right. But no, I got the right answer, but you didn't show your work. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, your testimony is showing your work. God wants you to show your work. You know, he wants people not to just see that you're here, you know, but how did you get here? You know, and how can you bring others along with you? You know, so even in your walk and your discipleship is really just showing your work, man. You know, not being closed off, not letting people just see the result, you know, because they don't know what you had to go through. You know, you had to carry the 2 parentheses, everything you had to do, right? Show your work so you can help others. Because that's how we all overcome.
Yeah, you know, not to, you know, take too much time, but when I think about evangelism, and I actually had an opportunity to share to our congregation it was a watch night service. You won't catch me on a Sunday, I'm just saying. But I did share, and it was the concept of like doable evangelism. Because a lot of times we ascribe the act of someone ushering Christ in their heart as like your job is done, right? So it's like, hey, I spoke to someone, they accepted Christ. No, I don't know who they are. I don't know where they went, but I'm, you know what I'm saying? But we all know that that's just the beginning. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, it's like, this is the journey. This is the walk with someone. It isn't just purely the fact that they've accepted Christ, but now that's when you really have that obligation to walk alongside them. And so, you know, for me, it's just the practical opportunities of just being transparent and just allowing people, as you said, to see the work that has been done within you, you know, and just offer it to others. Like, this is a God thing, man. This isn't about me. And here's why I can tell you that. This is what happened at this point. Tell me that ain't God.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think discipleship and mentorship they just go hand in hand. When I think about discipling at its root, like, you know, the actual disciples to Christ, you know, you think, you know, you look back just historically, Jesus was called rabbi, he was called teacher, right? So it was but forget about for a second, put aside miracle worker, put aside all the other kind of things that we know in popular culture. In that first century Palestinian Jewish community, he was a teacher and a leader, and he led 12 men, and those 12 men, 11 of those 12 men ended up are the reason that the gospel was spread, and within 200 years was the major worldview of the Mediterranean world. Right. And so that was due to his teaching and his guiding and his leading. So for those of us who now, 2,000 years later, sit in this tradition, and we have this Judeo-Christian worldview, our entire life is guided by this worldview. We sit in a tradition of teaching. We sit in a tradition of leading. We sit in a tradition of going out and making others. The last thing Jesus said, the Great Commission, go out into the world and make disciples of all nations. It's innate to who we are. When we sit down with anybody, whether we like it or not, because we're in this tradition, there's a call on us to always reach out to the next person and sow into them and feed into them. So I think discipleship is innately connected to mentorship. I think there's a reason that when you did your mentor episode, you got a couple church boys on the panel, because what else are we supposed to do when this is the spirit by which we see everything in the world?
Drop the mic, man. You just dropping the mic. Drop it.
I could throw something in there, but
Oh man,
I'll throw something in there. So I agree 1,000% with everything that's been said. I think that there's a theory and a praxis that's usually missing, right? So the theory is, I am the bread of life, right? That's what Jesus said, right? That's the theory. But the praxis or the practical piece is, all right, come get this 2 fish and 5 loaves, right? And so at some point, it can't just be theoretically, I am this mystical, God figure who is the manifestation of bread from heaven. But there has to be a human element of, no, here is the physical bread too. And so I think that discipleship and mentorship is a marrying between the two. It's a marriage of the theory of what we believe, but also putting it into practice, sharing our testimony, evangelizing, finding ways to, put what we say we believe, which is what I really think Dante was saying. We say we believe all these things, and we say that we understand what Jesus means, but we have to show and do and be before we just speak and leave it there. And so I think that that's kind of the difficulty, because some folks just love theory, the idea of helping, and some folks just love practice, not knowing how to help correctly. And so I think that we need to be always discerning and wrestling with that, because you can be too much help to somebody, right?
Yeah.
And you can handicap somebody, but then you can also be too little help to somebody. And so it's our job to figure out theory and practice, how we can put what we think and what we believe into a system, which can be done through mentorship, that is actually effective. Because I think there's a difference between busyness and effectiveness that we have to kind of find in our own lanes, whether it's educational, whether it's mentoring programs, church, whatever it is, it's finding that balance as Black mentors, because our time is precious, but we want to be effective,
And if I could just throw something else, and it's just way, way off topic in some regard, but just something that you said, Lawrence. We've talked about, not being perfect, but, as we've just been thinking about mentorship, it's not just the spiritual, it's not just the intellectual, but it's the physical too. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, there's a number of Black men I'm familiar with who have either died from heart attack or other physical ailments, or, had heart attacks or like really serious, physical, just ailments that, almost took them out. So I'm thinking too, just as we are mentoring, spiritually and, intellectually and in so many other ways, just making sure that we're also demonstrating healthy, habits, so that we can continue to, to be, mentors and leaders, and so we can show our students who, I'm teaching in, mostly urban, neighborhoods before I got my current designation, and I stopped to the, the corner store to get a black bag full of, a big hug and some chips for breakfast. And so I don't know why I kind of steered into that. And I know our time is up, but just thinking too, brothers, just ensuring that we're also trying to teach our young men to be healthy, and to take care of our bodies as we take care of our minds, so we can be around to, hopefully do God's work.
No, you're on it, Horace, especially now, man. I mean, think of how pre-existing conditions have affected, and impacted those in terms of the relation to the pandemic that we're in now. And then also think of how disproportionate, the mortality rate has been in the African-American community. So, the idea or the knowledge or awareness of our health is as crucial in 2020 as it's ever been, where actually walking outside can kill you based off of how you've cared for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Wow, guys, I love this. I love this so much, man. This was definitely a very special episode to me personally, and I hope it did touch each of you as well and everybody watching. But that is our time, so I definitely want to thank my special guests for today who impacted so much heartfelt wisdom. These are guys who genuinely care about our community, each other, and building each other up. So I want to thank Sam, Dante, Horace, Lawrence for being my guests today. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. If you like what you saw, like what you heard, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with a neighbor, guys. We're doing this so that we can uplift each other, all right, in our community, and continue to be a mentor and a disciple to everyone that we can come in contact with. All right, so thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Until next time, peace.
Peace.